What if I told you that just a few moments ago, your name was spoken in a realm that most people will never truly understand? Imagine for a second that the activity of heaven didn't just slow down to celebrate a milestone, but actually paused in complete silence because of what was being recorded about your life. I want you to stay with me for these next few minutes, because once you grasp the weight of this truth, you will never look at your daily struggles or your future the same way again. We are standing in a very thin window of time right now, and I need you to listen closely to what is being revealed. There are only about 5 minutes left in this specific spiritual alignment, and I want to be very clear. This is not symbolic language. This isn't meant to be a poetic metaphor or some random coincidence that popped up on your screen. In the spiritual world, timing is incredibly precise, sharp, and intentional. When a name is read from the eternal book of records, it signifies that something irreversible has just taken place in the unseen. A cycle didn't just fade away into the background of your life, it was officially closed. A long, difficult chapter didn't just drift off, it was brought before the light and judged as complete. Your name wasn't just whispered in some hidden corner where no one could hear it. It was read aloud, clearly and deliberately, with the full attention of the heavens. The moment those syllables were uttered, there was a reaction that no one on this earth could have anticipated. It didn't start with people, and it didn't start with your physical circumstances. Something shifted in the atmosphere itself. A momentum that was expected to follow one path suddenly changed its course entirely, and the reason for that pivot was tied directly to the record of your life and the character you have shown. This message didn't find you by accident. It didn't just show up in your feed because of a computer algorithm. It crossed through layers of time, resistance, and constant distraction because you were absolutely meant to hear these words at this exact second, right before the next part of your story begins to unfold. Before we dive deeper into what was said, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Drop a 99 in the comments. In the spirit, the number 9 represents completion, and 99 signifies a double closing, the ending of one long season and the permanent sealing of another. By doing this, you aren't just engaging with a post. You are actively aligning yourself with a movement that is already working in your favor. Stay with me, because what happened after your name was read is what truly shocked the witnesses of heaven. You see, the Book of Records is one of the most misunderstood concepts in spiritual history, and that lack of understanding is exactly what keeps so many people blind to the miracles happening in their lives right now. Most people think of this book as a list of crimes or a catalog of every failure they've ever committed. They view it as a court transcript waiting to condemn them, but that couldn't be further from the truth. This ledger is actually something far more powerful and far more unsettling to the darkness. This book is a ledger of truth, but not the kind of truth the public sees. It doesn't record the version of yourself that you present to the world or the you that people think they know. Instead, it tracks the truth beneath the surface. It records the hidden layers of your decisions, your secret motives, your silent endurance, and your incredible restraint. It documents the things that never made it into your daily conversations. It remembers the battles you fought in the middle of the night when no one was there to cheer you on or offer you a hand. The records show the discipline you practiced when you were completely alone and there was no audience to impress. It tracks the immense strength it took for you to stay calm and silent when reacting would have been totally justified. Every single time you chose integrity over a quick impulse or patience over an emotional explosion, something was written down. It wasn't recorded with a loud blast of trumpets. It was done quietly and with extreme precision. You see, this book doesn't respond to the applause of men. It only responds to the alignment of a human soul with its higher purpose. It documents those specific moments when you were inches away from quitting, but you chose to take one more step instead. It records the nights you questioned everything, feeling like your world was falling apart, yet you still woke up the next morning and moved forward with hope. There were seasons in your life where nothing seemed to change on the outside, and you kept showing up even though there was zero evidence that it would ever pay off. While others around you were getting quick rewards and fading just as fast, your progress was moving on a completely different frequency. Your growth was slower on the surface, but it was growing much deeper underneath. The Book of Records tracks depth, not speed. It remembers the delays that you misinterpreted as denials. It preserves the absolute truth behind every misunderstanding you've endured, especially the ones that damaged your reputation or left you feeling isolated from the people you cared about. When people misjudged you, when your intentions were twisted by others, or when your silence was mistaken for weakness, those lies did not overwrite the record. In fact, those moments only made the truth of your character stand out more clearly. This is exactly why nothing you have endured has ever been vanished or wasted. Nothing you went through dissolved into nothingness. Every time you restrained a reaction, every mature decision you made while under intense emotional pressure, and every time you chose to walk away instead of destroying someone else, all of it accumulated weight. When your name was finally read, the sound of it wasn't light or casual. It carried substance. It had gravity. It resonated through the heavens because your journey has been anything but casual. You have lived a life of substance. Your life has been observed in layers that most people will never have the capacity to experience. You were watched in those moments where you felt most alone, and you were evaluated in seasons where you felt completely invisible to the world. Here is the part that most people never consider. The Book of Records doesn't just store what happened in the past. It serves as a signal for what a person is capable of handling in the future. When your name appeared, it triggered a recognition that you had finally matured enough to move into a position of much greater influence. But what followed that recognition wasn't just a simple, automatic approval. There was a pause, a sudden hesitation, and a question that changed the entire tone of the proceedings. Heaven wasn't shocked because you suffered. Suffering is common in this world. It happens every day to people who never grow and to people who eventually collapse under the weight of their pain. What caused the disturbance in the spiritual realm was something far rarer than common suffering. The expectation was that you would follow a very predictable, human pattern based on the pressure you were under. Given the length of your delays and the number of disappointments stacked against you, the assumption was that time would eventually wear you down. The logical conclusion was that isolation would harden your heart, and that your unanswered questions would slowly turn into a deep, seated resentment toward life. That is what usually happens to people. That is what history and human nature suggest. But when your journey was reviewed by the highest authorities, that pattern was broken. The reaction shifted because what they saw in you did not match the typical human outcome. You were pressed from angles that most people will never have to face. That pressure didn't hit you all at once in a single blow. It came in strategic waves, spaced out just enough to keep you tired and drained. It was just enough pressure to make quitting feel like a perfectly reasonable option, and yet something deep inside of you refused to corrode. You felt anger, of course, but you didn't let it rot into bitterness. You experienced crushing disappointment, but you didn't let it turn you into a cruel person. You were delayed for years, but that delay didn't disconnect you from your sense of purpose. That massive contradiction is exactly what caught the attention of the divine. You bent under the weight, but you never snapped. You absorbed the impact of life's blows without becoming sharp and jagged toward others. You lost things, you lost people, you lost time, and you lost opportunities. Yet you didn't let those losses rewrite your fundamental character. Heaven observed the moments where you had every justification to give up and retreat, and instead you adapted. You did it quietly and imperfectly, but you did it sincerely. That adaptation mattered more than any visible success ever could. Through your trials, you learned the art of restraint while being provoked. You learned how to have patience while being ignored by the world. You gained clarity while walking through a thick fog of confusion. These are not just survival skills, these are the traits of a leader. These are governing characteristics. The shock deepened when it became clear that you didn't just survive, you retained your empathy. You kept your ability to care for others even when being cared for felt like a distant memory. Pain usually makes people narrow and suspicious, but your pain refined you. You didn't emerge from the fire louder or more boastful. You emerged sharper. This changed how your entire journey of endurance was interpreted. You weren't just a survivor anymore. You became someone who could be trusted with real influence without becoming corrupt. You became someone who could hold authority without becoming cruel, and someone who could walk in clarity without becoming arrogant. This is why the reaction in heaven wasn't applause. It was a profound silence. Real resilience doesn't need to announce itself. It simply redefines everyone's expectations. This brings us to the moment you are in right now. The reason this message is reaching you is that your internal window is opening. For a long time, your life felt like it was moving but not actually advancing. It felt like you were putting in massive effort without seeing proportionate results. That wasn't stagnation. It was a period of divine containment. The old timeline of your life had not yet expired, and nothing new can fully begin until the old has officially ended. This 5-minute window marks the exact moment where that expiration occurs, and the old laws of your life lose their power. You didn't arrive here because you figured it all out with your intellect. You were carried here by your own endurance. While you were just focused on surviving the day, the universe was quietly arranging the conditions for your transition. Doors you thought were locked were actually just timed. Opportunities you thought you missed were actually being withheld until your capacity could match the assignment. This moment is a handoff, a transfer from one version of your life to another. And transfers require you to be awake and aware, so you don't use old instincts in a new season. This isn't just an inspirational talk meant to make you feel good for a few minutes. This is a cold, hard confirmation meant to recalibrate your mind. The restlessness you've been feeling lately isn't anxiety, it's anticipation. It's your spirit responding to a shift before your brain can put it into words. You are standing at the edge of a new reality, and the ground beneath you is already moving. What happens next depends on your recognition that this window will close, and once the new timeline begins, you can never go back to being the person you were before. You were never meant to be treated like everyone else, and I know that has been confusing for you. It looked unfair and excessive from the outside, but it was never about punishment. It was about design. Some people are cushioned from friction so they can stay functional in small roles, but you were exposed to pressure because you are meant to operate on a much larger scale. Pressure reveals the architecture of the soul. It shows what holds up under strain. Your life has been a testing ground, and the silence you experienced was actually the best conditioning you could have received. Heaven doesn't entrust heavy assignments to untested hands, because untested hands drop what they aren't emotionally prepared to carry. You were tested to see if you could remain grounded when things fluctuate, and ethical when your power increases. Those traits are rare, and they can only be grown through time and resistance. Your life didn't follow the easy path because ease would have never developed the muscles you need for what's coming next. Everything, the intensity, the isolation, and the timing, was part of a grand preparation for this specific assignment. As you move forward, know that the declaration has already been made in your favor. You now have the authority to move differently and to occupy space without shrinking. Things that once resisted you will start to soften, not because you are trying harder, but because your alignment has changed. You will start to sense what fits and what doesn't with much less emotional labor. You are stepping into a phase of effectiveness where your energy will no longer leak into the wrong places. This is your time to walk with clarity and confidence. Comment, I am ready to seal this shift. Your new chapter has already begun.